Okay, good morning, everybody. I am going to call this meeting to order. I want to welcome everyone to meeting number 28 of the Government Management Committee. I want to welcome members of the committee and other members of council in attendance today, and of course members of the public. For those of you in the room with us, there's a screen in the back corner that provides real-time updates concerning where we are in the agenda and what's coming up next. You can also follow the agenda and debate on your computer, tablet, or smartphone at www.toronto.ca/council. On behalf of the Government Management Committee, I would like to gratefully acknowledge its meeting on the traditional territories of the Mississaugas of the New Credit First Nation, the Haudenosaunee, and the Huron-Wendat, and the home to many diverse Indigenous peoples. Are there any declarations of interest under the Municipal Conflict of Interest Act? Seeing none, I need a motion to confirm our minutes of our last meeting on April 30th, 2018. Councillor Troisi, all in favor? Carried. There's a green sheet that has the speakers on it. There's one listed for item number 32. I'll do the rundown on the presentation. Okay, just to go through the agenda, item number 1 is the cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes as of June 5th, 2018. That's for a 9:45 a.m. hearing. Our next item is a presentation. It's the annual update on the OMERS as it relates to our City of Toronto employers' contributions. Number 3 is the Metropolitan Toronto Pension Plan Preliminary Funding Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2017. Councillor Davis is going to hold number 3. Number 4 is the Toronto Civic Employees Pension Plan Funding Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2017. Anybody like Councillor Davis is moving? All in favor? Carried. Number 5 is the Toronto Fire Department Superannuation and Benefit Fund Funding Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2017. Councillor Shan's moving that. All in favor? Carried. Number 6 is the Metropolitan Toronto Police Benefit Fund Preliminary Funding Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2017. Councillor Shan is moving it. All in favor? Carried. Number 7 is the 1901 Weston Road designation of a portion of the property as a municipal capital facility. Councillor Nunziata, we're just going to go through the agenda. Councillor, I don't think there's any issues with this, but Councillor Nunziata wanted to speak for a minute to this at the end. My pleasure. Number 8 is TTC Occupied Properties designation of a portion of the properties as municipal capital facilities.
I'll move the staff recommendation.
Good morning, Councillor Cole. Moving the staff recommendations on number 8, just in time. Carried. Number 9, status of outstanding payment in lieu of tax amounts for federal, provincial, and municipal properties. Councillor Choice is moving this. All in favor? Carried. Number 10 is the 2017 consulting service expenditures for city divisions and major agencies and corporations.
I'd like to hold that.
Councillor Troisi is holding number 10. Number 11 is 1884 Davenport Road, designation of a portion of the property used by the Stop Community Food Center as a municipal capital facility. It's in Ward 17.
Yeah.
Councillor Davis.
Paul, actually, sorry, Chair. The Councillor Caesar Palacio would like to defer that. There's a letter circulated.
I think.
Sorry?
I can hold it down unless something's changed. My understanding was Councillor Palacio was fine with number 11, but wanted to defer number 28. I can hold it down and
hold it down because he says he would. At the bottom of that letter, he said he wanted to share concerns and ask that the item be deferred until further notice. 28. Sorry, it's 2801.
Sorry, it's 2828.
2828, yes.
Wrong one,
Okay.
sorry. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, he's got a couple, yep.
Yeah.
Sorry.
All right. Sorry, did you want to hold number 11 or did you want to approve number 11? Councillor Choice is moving number 11. Okay, all in favor? Carried. Number 12, request to amend purchase order number 6041950 with a Kaleen Limited for time attendance and scheduling system, the TASK project. Anybody? Councillor Davis, I see you pondering. You're moving the recommendations? All in favor? Carried. Number 13, non-competitive contract with Bloomberg Finances LP for the provision of continued leasing of proprietary software and data services. Anybody want to hold this? Somebody want to move it for me? Councillor Davis, all in favor? Carried. Number 14, non-competitive contract with Restec Company Incorporated for the DRS microfiche scanner replacement and annual maintenance and support. Anybody want to debate this? Councillor Shan's moving it. I saw him move his pencil. All in favor? Carried. Number 15, non-competitive contract with the Clareville Ranch for the City of Toronto's horseback riding program at the Toronto Region Conservation Authority's Clareville Conservation Area. Councillor Cole, want to move it? All right. All in favor? Carried. Number 16, amendment to purchase order number 6043220 for the Riverdale Park East-Northeast Quadrant Park improvements in Ward 30. Anybody want to approve this? Somebody want to debate it? No, I will move it. Councillor Davis is moving this. All in favor? Carried. Number 17, Community Space Tenancy Lease Agreement with the Ontario Historical Society at 34 Parkview Avenue and Municipal Capital Facility designation for Ontario Historical Society. Councillor Davis, was that your enthusiasm as I was reading this?
No, I will. I'm happy to move 28.17.
Okay,
But
Councillor
I
Davis.
do have questions, I'm sorry, on 2816. But maybe I'll just ask them.
Sorry, you have questions
afterwards.
on number 16?
I know it's been moved, and it will be going, oh, this will not go to council.
All right, so let's have a motion to reopen number 16. All in favor? And then Councillor Davis is going to hold number 16.
Yes. And I'll ask questions offline.
And Councillor Davis is moving the recommendations in number 17. All in favor? Carried. Number 18 is a community space tenancy lease agreement with the Theatre Passé Mural at 16 Ryerson Avenue in Ward 20. Councillor Shan's moving the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 19, community space tenancy lease agreement with the Children's Peace Theatre at 305 Dawes Road and a municipal capital facility designation for the Children's Peace Theatre in Ward 31, which is Councillor Davis's ward.
I'll move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption of the recommendations. All in favor? Carried. Number 19, community space tenancy lease agreement with the Lakeshore Area Multi-Service Project or LAMP at 185 5th Street in Ward 6. Sorry. Councillor Cole's moving it. All in favor? Carried. What did I say? Oh, sorry. Number 21, community space tenancy lease agreement with the Senior People's Resources in North Toronto Incorporated, known as Sprint, at 140 Merton Street in Ward 22. Councillor Cole is moving that. All in favor of the recommendations? Carried. Number 22 is a community space tenancy lease with the Storefront Humber Incorporated at 2445 Lakeshore Boulevard West, Ward 6. Councillor Shan is moving it. All in favor? Carried. Number 23 is a conveyance of Brandon Hill Court, Bagot Court, Bajot Court, Polaris Lane, part of Varnout Drive, part of Flemington Park, and a 1-foot reserve at the rear of 161 and 167 Rainy Avenue to the Toronto Community Housing Corporation for inclusion in the Lawrence Avenue Revitalization Project.
I will move that and just briefly say that a project that I think when I was first elected in 2010, an incoming mayor said it would be canceled on its first day. And right now, the market units are sold out. They sold out in a matter of weeks. And both TCH tenants and new members of the community will be moving into their buildings in a few weeks.
Okay. All in favor of the recommendations on number 23? Did you want a recorded vote?
Sure, why not?
All right, we'll have a recorded vote. All in favor of the recommendations in number 23? Councillor Cole, Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Davis, Councillor Shan, Councillor Troisi. That's unanimous. Number 24, provision of comprehensive elevator maintenance services from Cone Incorporated.
Are they the ones that fix our elevators?
I believe it is.
That's a different one. It's a different one.
There's more than one elevator contract? Maybe that's the problem. All right. All in favor of the recommendations in number 24 to fix the elevators again? Carried. We hope. Number 25 is the opportunities to utilize car share technology solutions on city-owned vehicles. I'm going to hold that.
I'd like, okay.
Sorry, Councillor Davis, did you want to hold it?
No, it's okay. One whole.
I'm going to hold it. Number 26, opportunities to incorporate social procurement provisions into a contract for electrical services. Councillor Davis? All three of you want to hold it?
No, I'll move it.
You're sure?
Yes,
Positive?
yes.
Okay. We can hold it. It's not a big deal.
No, it's okay.
All right.
Read the report.
All in favor of the recommendations in number 26? Number 27, non-competitive contracts with existing vendors for the extension of proprietary technological maintenance and support, license subscription, and the provision of professional services. Councillor Cole is moving it. All in favor? Carried. Number 28, land exchange with 2470347 Ontario Incorporated, known as Galleria Developments, for city land forming part of the Wallace Emerson Park and Community Center at 1260 Dufferin Street. This is in Ward 18.
Yes.
Councillor Palacio has sent me some correspondence. I think all of us wishes to defer this until the July 3rd, 2018 meeting of the Government Management Committee. All in favor of the deferral? Carried. Opposed? Seeing none. Motion is amended. All in favor? Carried. Thanks, Carl. Number 29, the implementation plan and framework for integrating circular economy approaches into city procurement processes to support waste reduction and diversion. Councillor Davis is holding number 29. Number 30, establishment of a
Chair?
French.
Mr. Chair, maybe we can have a little presentation. I don't know whether
On 29?
Jim is prepared, or I don't know who's
Staff aren't prepared.
shaking his head.
Can they be prepared? Can they talk?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely, we
we'll
just
speak
don't have
to
a
it
presentation.
When we get, okay. Number 30, establishment of a French language university in Toronto, an update, and I have a revised recommendation that I asked legal for after I read this report. I had some questions whether this was in the purview of the City of Toronto, and they've moved some recommendations so that it clarifies our support. And the motion's on this screen. Everybody's good with that? I can hold it down if you want. I haven't heard of any financial support yet for it. Why don't we hold it down? Number 31, French language needs for refugee newcomers to Toronto. Somebody like to move this? Councillor Shan, all in favor? Carried. Number 32, selection of the Ireland Park Foundation for the establishment of an arts and heritage designation in the Bathurst Quay neighborhood. And I have one deputant, but Councillor Cressy.
I understand if there's no interest in holding down, the deputant's happy to withdraw his name.
Okay, I'm fine with the recommendations. Committee's fine with the recommendations. So the deputant's withdrawing. Councillor Cole is moving it. And I'd like a recorded vote on this one as well. All in favor of the recommendations? Councillor Cole, Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Davis, Councillor Shan, Councillor Troisi, and that passes unanimously. Number 33 is Nathan Phillips Square Bike Station update. Somebody want it? Sorry, Councillor McMahon?
Well, I just had a motion that Councillor Davis would move for me, if that's okay. Just a quick.
It's very
Okay.
quick.
Oh, the motion's not ready yet?
Okay.
So we'll hold it down. Okay. We're going back to the beginning of the agenda. Before we do that, we have a short presentation from one of our employees. Where's Arthur? Where's Arthur hiding? Arthur, come on up. I would like to introduce everybody, if you haven't met Arthur Duku. Arthur started with the City of Toronto in 1978. Shortly after receiving his MBA, he started his career in finance. I believe he's worked with Councillor Troisi as well, and has done just about everything there is to do, as well as spending a significant amount of time in the Parks Department. He's currently the manager of General Ledger Services and Accounts Receivable. He's been responsible for every significant costing exercise that has resulted in the city getting reimbursements from other levels of government, including during the ice storm and the G20 summit. Today, after 40 years with the City of Toronto, it's Arthur's last day, and on behalf of the Government Management Committee, we would like to wish Arthur a long, happy, healthy retirement. He certainly earned it. We have a scroll for Arthur, and I think we're just going to do... Still some pills here. Maybe Arthur can get it done by the end of the day. So Arthur, we'd like to wish you a long, happy, healthy retirement. We're just going to do a photo with the members of the committee in front of the chair. Sorry, Councillor Tracy, do you want to say something?
Yeah, I'd like to actually, because Arthur, I know you were a finance guy, but when you were in Parks and Rec, you knew everything about every operation. You were the most helpful city employee to everyone. So on behalf of that division, thank you. And you really were a pillar for many. So thank you.
Thank you. We're just going to go up here. Sure. We've got a scroll for you. So everybody, we're just going to do a photo in front of in the center. Arthur didn't want anything, so we're doing our best not to give him anything. Okay. 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 Okay, yeah, I'm fine with that. I just assumed it was.
No, he totally blindsided me. Totally blindsided. I don't know what this is. Did you know what this is about? No, it's just being an actor. It's just politics.
I thought it was in, I just assumed it was in Caesar's ward. I would never do that to somebody else.
This is what, sorry, you couldn't see this, but I just found that out right now.
I just assumed, Josh, I just assumed it was in Caesar.
He's running against.
Yeah. Josh, I just assumed it was in Caesar's ward. Okay. Certain. Yeah, I'm fine to move it. We're just going to reopen number 28 to pass it. So there's some politics. I just assumed. Okay, sorry, we took care of Arthur.
Can we do that now?
Sure, let's take care of it now. So we did vet the agenda. Councillor Bylaw got held up in traffic, which happens. We're just going to go back to number 28, so I need a motion to reopen number 28, which is in Councillor Bylaw's ward. Councillor Cole is moving to reopen it. And then, so we have the recommendations in the report before us. Yeah, sorry. All in favor of reopening this item? Okay, and then we have the recommendations in the report before us. All in favor of the recommendations in the report?
Any opposed?
Any opposed? Councillor Cressy, are you back?
Riling up the.
And that was moved by myself. All in favor of the recommendations? And that's carried. Okay. Now we are back to item number 1, which is the cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes as a. Oh, sorry, Councillor Nunziata, Deputy. Madam Speaker, my apologies. Item number 7.
I'll just be a minute, if you don't
Yep,
mind.
No, take your
Okay.
time. My apologies. Item number 7.
On 28.7, which is the York West Active Living Center, 1901 Western Road. First of all, I just want to acknowledge we have 2 members here in the yellow shirts, the seniors from the club. Wave.
Thank you for being here this morning,
Yeah,
ladies.
they're here just to, show support. And I'd also like to thank Chris and Chris that worked on this report. 1901 Weston Road is a Toronto housing building, and York West, they've been in that space on the main floor since 1981, and they've been providing services to seniors in the community, not only for the community as well as for the seniors within the Toronto housing building. And they have done a lot of programming, and it's a facility that they service not only the seniors but as well as the community at large. And so this report is for designation of a portion of the property as a municipal capital facility. They have been paying rent to Toronto Housing for all these years, and so and that's the reason for the report, is to help them because of the financial state that they're in, if they have to continue and pay increased rent at this facility. So I want to thank staff for meeting with them and as well bringing this report forward. It's greatly appreciated, and I'd like to ask for a recorded vote to remove the recommendation.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Nunziata. Just as a formality, I have to ask if there's any questions of staff on this item. Seeing none, and none for the mover. Seeing none. And Councillor Nunziata, I just want to acknowledge you did thank the staff, but I think you need some words of acknowledgement as well for all the hard work that you did for this on behalf of your community. And I'm sure the representatives are here, but I'm sure your community needs to know the hard work that you've done on this file as well. Okay, and a recorded vote on this item. All in favor of the recommendations. Number 7, Councillor Cole, Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Shan, Councillor Choicey. Councillor Davis, did you want to vote on number 7? Yes. And Councillor Davis, the item is unanimous of the committee. Thank you, Councillor Nunziata. And we are back to number 1. Oh my God. Who stapled this? There we go. Number 1, cancellation, reduction, or refund of property taxes as of June 5th, 2018. Hearing. I need to ask if anybody is in the room that wants to make a deputation on this item. Is there anybody here that wants to make a deputation on item number 1? And if there's anybody in the room that wants to make a presentation or a deputation on item number 1? Seeing none, I do have an amendment to this item. The Government Management Committee approved the individual tax appeal application made pursuant to Section 323 of the City of Toronto Act 2016, resulting in tax deductions, excluding the phase-in or capping amounts identified in the detailed hearing report, marked as Appendix A, excluding the following application: Appeal number 201-70920 in Ward 13, and the property address is 4 Dacre Crescent. Any questions of the mover? Seeing none, all in favor of the amendment? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Let you have that back. So we don't have any citizen deputants today, so we're going on to item number 2, which is the annual update on OMERS as it relates to the City of Toronto's employer contributions. And there's a presentation. Good morning, Mr. Penichetti. And there's a hard copy of the presentation that's been distributed.
Morning, Mr. Chair, through you to committee.
You look younger than you were here last year.
It's been 3 years. The bags have now depleted. So good morning, through you, Mr. Chair, to the committee. First, some introductions. Most of the committee know us, know myself. 2 councillors I don't believe I ever have met. Joe Penichetti, former city manager, CFO. Your representative on OMERS board. David?
My name's David Beattie. I'm the city representative on the OMERS administration board. Lived in Toronto my entire life. And
I'd also like to make a few introductions of staff that are here in case there's any detailed questions, Mr. Chair, later on. Firstly, Blake Hutchison, President and Chief Pension Officer. Jonathan Simmons, CFO for OMERS. Paul Arita, CEO for the Sponsors Corporation. And Chris Vandendyke, Vice President, Pension Strategy and Governance for the Sponsors Corporation, as well as Jason Pope, Manager of Stakeholder Relations. So with that background, we're here really to give you an update as per the title of the report and a presentation to ensure that annually we fill you in as to where things are at with OMERS in terms of key strategic issues. I'll provide a brief overview some background for committee, just a few slides. Then David will highlight the 2017 financial results. And then I will come back with an update on our plan review related to OMERS. So, as quickly as possible, hopefully 15 minutes, some background for especially the new councillors that may have not seen this. We've got a little different structure at OMERS, 2 boards. The first one I'll deal with on the right, OMERS Sponsors Corporation. Effectively, the board is responsible for the governance part of decision-making, appointing board members, setting contribution rates, and plan design. There's 14 board members, 7 each from employee and employer sponsors, 2 co-chairs. In fact, the one co-chair is Frank Ramanagno, the head of Toronto Firefighters Association. He's representing the Ontario Firefighters Associations. The other co-chair is from AMO. On the left-hand side is what's referred to as the Administration Corporation, 15 board members, again, 7 each employee-employer, and an independent chair, George Cook, with an exceptional background. The AC board is responsible for the day-to-day pension administration, most importantly, or as importantly, investments and plan valuation. In terms of OMERS itself, one of the largest pension funds in terms of members in Canada. Firstly, important to note the size with the 482,000. Active members on the right-hand side, you'll see there 283,000, pensioners 154,000. As we call it, an active to retiree ratio of about 2 to 1. In the left-hand side, you see the members, 1,000 municipalities, libraries, police, fire, all local agencies that fall under municipalities, but also included in OMERS are the non-teacher staff within school boards across Ontario and the Children's Aid Society. So it's primarily municipal members and related agencies, but also includes some that fall under the wing of the province. As you'll see there, largely full-time workers, but growing, as you all know, part-time membership, and average age of pensioners there. I will be talking a lot about how, as you well know, our membership is aging. And then finally, 2015, the board approved the 2020 strategy that was effectively moving on plan sustainability was the ultimate overarching goal with 4 major pillars. Enhancing or increasing our funding status that we'll speak to in a few minutes. A target of 7 to 11% net investment returns. Building relationships within membership as well as with sponsors, and refining our business model. With that background, Mr. Chair, I'll turn it over to David to walk through the 2017 results.
Thank you, Joe, and thank you for the opportunity to present our annual returns and the long-term conservative investing and valuation processes that we take very seriously. I'm also a member of the investment committee, so see all the major investments over $500 million. Last year, we had a good return. It was 11.5%. The total assets of the fund grew to $95 billion, and the smoothed funded ratio improved by 1% to 94. That's about a $10 billion increase in the assets. The fund is rated by the rating agencies very high, literally at 2 notches above the province, AAA by both DBRS, Moody's, and AA+ by S&P. It is the 5th consecutive year that we've had improvements in returns. You'll see over the longer term, we're quite pleased with the 3- and 5-year net return average. The 10-year catches the 2008-2009 financial crisis. We take a long-term view at OMERS. We're pleased with where it has gone in the last 3 to 5 years. In terms of asset mix, it is a highly diversified asset mix. It is diversified both by the types of investments. We're about 55% public markets, so that would be certain types of bonds and equities as you would traditionally consider. Then there's a very large private portfolio, which includes both the Oxford Property Real Estate Group that Blake used to head up, the infrastructure group, which is power, pipeline, utility, transportation assets, and finally a private equity group, which is roughly split 50% between North America and Europe. In terms of geographic distribution, we're a little over a third in each of Canada and the United States, and about 25% in the rest of the world. We opened an office in Singapore last year. We have staffed it. We've put some very senior people there to source some of the higher, faster growth opportunities in Asia. We tend to do those with high-quality partners, whether out of Japan, the Singapore investment funds, GIC, and Temasek. On the next slide, you'll see the improvement in the funding ratio. This is the 5th consecutive year that it has improved. The upper line shows the actual mark-to-market value. So without any smoothing over a 5-year period, which is the way the actuaries insist that these things are calculated, it's back to roughly 100%. On a smooth basis, which is how we have to report it, it's 94%. Another way to look at that is there's about $6 billion in gains, which could be used to absorb increased volatility in a particular asset class. For example, if equities fell 15%, they fell 10 in February, you would be able to absorb that kind of hit without any increase in contributions. We also have the ability, and we have systematically been reducing our discount rate. And again, this is what the liabilities are valued at, and it is more conservative to have a lower discount rate. And we've been systematically being more conservative on valuation by lowering that discount rate as is appropriate in a lower interest rate and return environment. So the target is to improve that to 3.75% in 2025. I'd like to stress that the 2020 strategic plan we are right on target for, and we are developing 2025 and 2030 plans. So this fund really has to look 30, 40 years ahead, as you saw from that wonderful employee who just retired. You need a very long-term perspective. And Blake and Jonathan and their team are committed to that. So at this point, I'd like to entertain any questions you have to the two of us, or we're then going to turn it over to Paul Harrietha, who's the president of the Sponsors Corporation, and Chris Van Den Haak, who's the vice president and chief actuary.
Councillor Cole.
Oh, you're asking them?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, thanks for the presentation so far. I'm just curious on the asset mix on the infrastructure portion of it, and not that I need it this minute, but if there's a breakdown by country, most notably just to know, even anecdotally, if there's more funds flowing into Canadian assets or projects.
The challenge on infrastructure is finding assets with acceptable returns these days. There's a number of, there's probably $100 billion. Our infrastructure book is about $15 billion of equity, which is levered 2 to 1, so it's about $30 billion worth of assets. It is split roughly equally between North America and Europe. We like Canadian projects if they're available. So, as you know, our biggest single asset is in the province of Ontario, and it's a half interest or a little less than half with TransCanada at Bruce Nuclear, which is being refurbished right now in a $15 billion program, providing 30% of the electricity to the province. And it has a 50-year PPA with the province's electrical authority. So we do actively look at these assets. We looked at a piece of 407 recently. We own an asset which connects the railway tunnel, which connects Windsor to Detroit. There was a proposal to expand that has gone through. And we look at various transmission and power assets if and when they become available. So.
And sorry, and roughly what's the percentage of the asset mix that infrastructure would make up?
Infrastructure is $15 billion worth of equity out of 95. So it's a little more than 15%. That'd be 17, 18%.
Would that be higher than your peers or in line?
Well, I'd have to check with Jonathan and others. OMERS was the pioneer in infrastructure investment with Borealis.
Yeah.
We're, typically in a 14 to 24% target range on infrastructure. So we're roughly in the middle.
But in terms of, I don't know if you have targets set, but you're pleased at 15%. You don't see a shift dramatically one way or the other off of that?
You would like to make more investments in long-term assets that provide a return for contracted return for 20, 30, 40 years, if you can find them. But to get these kinds of returns, those assets trade at 6.5% these days.
But you're not expecting any,
and
you're not expecting any big dispositions, though, I would imagine, based on the holdings you have, that would change that asset mix.
There's no discussion of major ones. There is a continual sort of culling of the portfolio.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
Yeah, we'd like to grow it. We're a little underweight relative to our long-term target, which is 21%. But as David said, you need to invest carefully to get there. So we're actively looking to grow.
Just to give you a feeling, we had over almost $3 billion worth of infrastructure proposals put up to an investment committee in the last month and a half. We won one. I don't think it's public yet. The one it's not public yet. No, we won one for sure.
We almost got a scoop there.
And we're negotiating to acquire another one. Again, it's a tricky seller. So we literally will look at 6 different proposals, and there's so much competition in the space that you might win 1 or 2, 3 would be a great result. But it's a trade-off between how low a return or IRR do you want to bid versus deploying capital. You can willy-nilly deploy capital at 6%. To get 8, 9, 10 to, achieve the funding status is the trick. And there is an exceptional group of people, Toronto, New York, London, that work on these projects. I'm very impressed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Cole. Councillor Davis, I saw your hand.
I just wanted to ask about your ethical investment policies. I think it is ESG, environmental, social governance.
Governance, yes.
Could you explain that, what your policies are?
I'll perhaps ask Jonathan to do that in specific detail, please.
Sure. So we're long-term investors, and obviously managing investment risk is critical to us. And so for us, we look at long-term investments through the ESG lens, through the lens of environmental, social, and governance factors. So governance factors are how well is the asset governed? Do we have the right governance in place to be able to manage that asset appropriately? Social factors include the impact that investments might have on the communities in which they operate, and environmental factors are those impacting our environment. And so our approach is that each of our teams, as we evaluate each asset, look through those three lenses at the asset, both at the time we invest and throughout the time that we manage the asset, to ensure that all of those risks are being appropriately managed.
So to operationalize those, or to measure the outcomes of those new lenses, I mean, how do you do that? I've seen your policy, it's very generic, it doesn't have any kind of way to measure the success of those policies. I know this is a new area, but I would hope that OMERS was a leader in this.
We have one very good example, and Blake will speak to it, which is our real estate company.
I can give you a good example, because the one operating company OMERS has is Oxford, which is 2,000 people. There's 1.5 million interactions every day. And the sustainability team at Oxford has won, without any exaggeration, I'm going to say over 100 awards and acknowledgements for sustainability in a global context. The Global Rating Agency for Sustainability, which is the way you can benchmark that business, has ranked Oxford the #1 real estate company in North America for its commitment to sustainability. And it measures operating costs, it measures construction techniques, and that industry itself has got it right, and you can measure it. The difficulty for, say, infrastructure is you'll have a 20% interest in a significant asset where you have a membership on governance, but you're not controlling the operating company. So it's hard to put in hard and fast rules, and it's also hard to control the rollout of those things when you don't control the operating company. But the one glowing example, and I think you'd be very proud from an international standpoint, is Oxford Properties today. It would be the model of that example.
Okay, that's one example, but I'm wondering how you extend that. I mean, how do you use your leverage to make improvements like Oxford's sustainability initiatives?
You're right, it's an evolution. And it's been, in recent years, we've been pretty proactive. The best way, private equity, we tend to control our investments. And one of the civs at the board is, are there opportunities to do that? And the flip side is, are we embarrassed by anything that is being done here that doesn't get caught by good and best practices? And we don't invest in things that would cause us any embarrassment. And we do invest in lots of businesses where there's an opportunity to get good at those things. But it is an evolution.
Not being embarrassed is one criteria, but I would think that you would be more proactive than that.
Well, fair enough. But I would just say the catch from that policy is that it is a knowing our stakeholders, we're not going to invest in anything that we think is not best practices in the world. I would think that's probably a better way of putting it.
Councillor, let me help. So, for example, we have an approach that on every private market investment where we sit on the board, we insist, because we have a seat on those boards of directors, that a conversation takes place in each of those boardrooms on the very issues that you described. That is bringing our influence to bear on the asset. I'll give you an example. I was visiting an asset recently. It's actually in South America. The asset is a very major employer in the region that it operates. Mm-hmm. And so that asset, in order to secure its sustainability for our pension plan to continue operating, can't take its operating license for granted. It's working with the community around creating sustainable communities where the former industry in that area has fallen away. And this is a creator of great sustainable jobs for that community. It's restored the environment around it, so it's ensuring that it's having a very positive impact on the environment around it. It's working with the education system in that community to ensure that the right young brains come forward who are able actually to supply us with the right workforce into the future. So it's multidimensional, it's active, And it starts with our seat and the influence that we have on those boards of directors.
So how is that work reported, and how is it, like, how are you holding them accountable?
Last question, Council.
On the social as well, labor practices, those kinds of things.
It's reported as part of our ongoing commitment to this area.
How often is it reported out?
Reported out.
Yeah, to your board, how often do you report out on the achieving the ESG objectives of your investment policy? How do you hold yourselves accountable for that?
So for the very first time in 2017, OMERS actually integrated into our annual report a report on sustainability. So it's new, as Blake says, it's evolving. We're taking steps, and so actually I'm very proud of what we did in 17. So if you take a look at the annual report, you'll see a much deeper analysis than you would have seen in previous years. We're making good progress.
At the board level, it is discussed in almost every investment. There are a number of members on the board where it's a particularly important topic. In addition to the Bruce Nuclear Clean Power, we just bought our first major wind renewable platform in North America. I believe the asset Jonathan's talking about in South America is a liquefied natural gas degasification, which allows Chile to produce its electricity with natural gas instead of coal. It is a consistent theme across the investing platform. It comes up in virtually every memo and presentation, and then if there is a concern, it is actively raised. The board is not shy about bringing things up. Personally, I stirred something up this week. You know, you have to, I guess to an extent, trust that the various representatives will do that. And remember, in addition to the bicameral board, you have a lot of labor and organization people actually on the OMERS board. So they are kept honest by that board at the end of the day.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Davis. Other questions of the deputants? Nope. No? Okay. I had a few. I wanted to, I don't know if whether this is a Joe or David question. So earlier you talked about the rate of return on our on the OMER investments was 11.5%.
Yes, correct.
What does that equate to in dollar value?
That's about a $10 billion increase year over year.
So the investment income last year was $10 billion.
It's a combination of cash distributions, dividends, interest, and mark to market. 85% of all the private assets are revalued every year in a detailed, systematic fashion. So it's a mix of both cash on cash and mark to market.
And you're expecting, or your business plan is the funding gap or the funded gap is going to be eliminated by 2025?
That's correct.
Okay.
This year, just to add a note of caution, and everyone has seen it, the equity market has returned to a level of volatility, you know, where it went up 10% in January, down 10% in February, and has been mixed to roughly even over the remainder of the year. So, you know, we have a plan of 7.3% this year. All the private side are performing exactly according to plan, you know.
And what's, so the 94%?
Anyone with a smartphone can see what's happened in equities, please.
So the 94%, what's the value of the 6%?
That's the difference between the actual mark-to-market value of all the investments on December 31st and the actuarial 5-year smoothed. There's a conservative approach used by the actuaries to take a 5-year smooth. So the last couple of years we've had 9.5, 10.
Yeah, it's increased every year, I think, for the last 5 years.
For the last 3.
Closed.
But, you know, it was 2.5 in 11 and 6 in 13. You know, there have been some challenging years. And it's a combination both of interest rates going up and the equity markets getting choppy when those returns have been difficult. So just a note of caution on the first 5 months. Very strong on the private side, more mixed on the public market side. Everyone knows interest rates have backed up 60, 70 basis points.
Okay, and then in terms of, maybe this is covered already, so the asset mix, majority of the assets or investments were in North America, but I've been reading, so OMERS or OMER Ventures been making investments in Mumbai, Berlin. Most recently, I think in Europe, there was an investment in a logistical company, but I don't see a lot of investments looking in the renewable energy areas.
We did announce, I believe, a $700 million U.S. investment in a company called Leeward, which is a large renewable wind platform. We're delighted to have that. It can be built upon, and they have many projects in the development pipeline. The European investments, and Jonathan, help me, are almost 100% hedged on the foreign exchange side?
Correct.
So we have a very cautious view of the problems occurring in Italy and with Brexit and the turmoil there. So the investments are all hedged back to Canadian dollars. Yes, you're correct on the asset mix. It was 36 or 34 in each of Canada and the U.S., so the majority is in North America.
And is there a plan to, you're reducing that because you seem to be, there's investments throughout the world now. Is that something you're trying to reduce that mix in North America?
I think gradually over the next 10 years, the 2030 plan will have an objective of going through the Singapore office to make large, high-quality investments in higher growth economies in Asia. So you'll see that currently, help me, Jonathan, 2-3% that's there, head towards 10%.
Correct. Okay.
That's correct.
All right, and then, sorry, my last question, I want to ask, so there's been some discussion lately, at least in the media, about de-indexing pensions.
Mr. Chair, I'm going to cover off the plan design in the next 5 minutes, and it's applicable to that section that I can answer the question maybe at the end of that presentation.
Okay, so you're going to cover that off in the next presentation? All right. Is there a slide deck for that one as well, or?
I believe you have the rest of the slide deck. We stopped after the financial results.
Okay.
And now the balance of the section is talking about our long-term sustainability plan.
Okay, all right, okay. Thank you, gentlemen. Any other questions of the deputants? Seeing none? Okay.
Thank you for the good questions.
Okay, through you, Mr. Chair, I'll just continue then. Plan sustainability, and there's been reference to the 2020 strategy that was approved in 2015, and basically at this point in time, we are working on pulling together our 2030 strategic plan, and the prime focus of that plan is plan sustainability. I wanted to highlight history regarding OMERS that many people do not realize, and one of the reasons why we are talking about plan sustainability. OMERS was set up in 1963. This chart that takes a bit to digest, I call it the mountain range that's in that gray, reflects the funded status of OMERS since inception. And we were very healthy, call it in the 20th century, from 63 to the late 90s, generally above funded status, meaning over 100% funded, which is what a pension plan should be, where a pension plan should be at to ensure that you can absorb the downturns that you see occur over the decades. And of course, what happened in the late 90s is the contributions rates were the investments were substantive in the late 90s, mid to late 90s. the board of the day, with 125% funding, decided to actually have a moratorium on contribution rates. Many of the councillors that are here and staff will remember this. The problem was there was a perfect storm right after that with a huge economic downturn, which you can see there. So you had the whammy of no contributions coming into the plan for 2+ years, combined with our earnings on the fund itself dropping drastically to the point where in 2005, as you can see, we were below 100% funding and creeping barely above 90%. The result at that point in time, in order to get funding back up, was a dramatic increase in contribution rates that you can see there. So the right-hand side, those lines, those red and blue lines are the contribution rates for the various categories that we have. And the funding, as has been highlighted, has been coming back. As you see, in the last 5 years, staff on OMER's team have done an incredible job to get us back up to the 95% that David's been talking about. I wanted to make sure you understood this, that we are well below where we were 2 decades ago. And in comparison, we are always looking to benchmark ourselves against other Ontario plans and Canadian and worldwide. And again, on the right-hand side, you'll see OMER's, and I would focus on what's called standardized comparison that adjusts the discount rate to kind of an average of what the plans are at 3.25%. And when you do that, whether it's reported or standardized, OMER's still is underfunded relative to other plans. We are in that range of actual smooth ratio of that 94% that David covered. When you standardize based on adjusted discount rates, we're actually lower, around 90%. And most of the stronger, I'll call best practice funds, are in that HOOP teachers area where they're already at 121%, et cetera, and they are actually looking to reduce contribution rates. In terms of our long-term sustainability objectives, we've got 5 key factors that are impacting us. Nothing earth-shattering here. They all are issues and challenges that we've highlighted in the past. Plan maturity. So our active to retirees is going down. There's more retirees. That puts more pressure on our liabilities. We're living longer, so the liabilities of carrying pension plans and funding your pension plans into the 80s and 90s creates pressures in terms of liabilities. Economic factors, every 8 to 10 years, we normally have a downturn. We have something imminent that will probably occur, hence the reason for having surplus funding in pension plans. Workforce trends, full-time to part-time. You saw the slide I had earlier. We're about 75% full-time, 25% part-time, but the part-times are increasing, and it's an area that we're looking at to try to grow our part-time membership. And CPP enhancement has somewhat complicated life in terms of designing our plan to integrate with CPP. Sustainability is important for the long-term view that we're looking at. We're looking out 20, 30 years plus to ensure that the monies are there to fund all pensioners. Sustainability is a very simple concept, but it's very difficult to deliver on. You're balancing the pressures of providing enhanced benefits in pension plans to trying to keep it to a reasonable range of costs. You have guiding principles, most importantly, the security of the plan and that pension for all pensioners, the affordability, and the equity to all members. And again, the challenge really is maintaining as best we can the range of benefits, along with maintaining a reasonable cost level relative to funding that pension plan by our employees, and obviously the pressure to the employers. So that's a high-level overview of the plan and where we're headed, and I want to emphasize the process. We have been consulting with major sponsors. I have been discussing where we're headed with options with staff. There will be a decision, and we call it a decision in principle, at the end of June by the Sponsors Corporation Board, the one that I sit on. We will, in effect, table a potential adjustment to design of our plan for consideration by employees and sponsors. We'll communicate that and look for input between June and October, with no ultimate final decision on any possible changes till November. It'll be the end of November. So at this stage, there is actually nothing before the board that has been tabled for decision. That will happen at the end of this month. Finally, a quick update on the closed plans for many of the committee members. A year ago, the City of Toronto, and again, thank you for the support through committee, along with OMERS, agreed to transfer the 5 closed plans, the pre-OMERS plans, to OMERS. We've been working very closely with staff, and I want to thank staff for all the work they've done on the closed plan. Long journey, I'll call it, because there's lots of regulation, legislation. Each plan's a little different, and we knew that it would take time. The York plan we hope to have approved and transferred and operational under OMERS by the end of this year at the latest in early 19. The other plans moving forward realistically in 19 and 20. And with that, Mr. Chair, we're open to questions on what I just covered here, which I guess would include the question you had earlier, Mr. Chair.
Okay. Councillor Davis.
Okay, Joe, give us some more. What is the decision changes that, what are the changes that are being considered? Surely you can give us some idea of what you're talking about.
Well, all of the benefits that are part of the pension plan, ranging from early retirement to, you know, the actual plan design itself, inclusive of contribution rates, inclusive of all of your makeup of that plan.
Everything,
so,
the basic.
And inclusive of the chair's comment related to indexing. We are looking at everything. That does not mean, and I know it will not mean, a changed, comprehensive, complete change on every aspect of the plan. We are looking at components that will make a difference in sustainability.
So
I want to, Councillor, just emphasize my earlier slides before I get into plan design. We do have to increase we are running at a deficit. We are 6% short of running in a surplus position. Pension plans, in order to ensure long-term sustainability, to ensure that the monies are there 20 years from now when we have virtually a 1-to-1 ratio of active members to retirees with less flexibility to have adjustments to ensure that we have the money for all retirees. We have to look in the long term to look at how we can get back up to 110 and 120%. We have to get to that.
need to earn more.
Well, we are earning at record levels, as you've seen. I mean, the 7 to 11% range, that 11% has been unheard of returns for decades.
Can't just come to the taxpayers.
So I want to emphasize my last few slides that said the challenge is both sides of the equation, as usual, no different than at the City of Toronto, the revenues and the expenditures. And the design is the expenditure side, the investments and all that is the revenue side. We are earning at record levels, but what I most fear is there will be a downturn. We will be hit with 10 to 15% downturn in markets. We have, as referred to, a $6 billion reserve, so we can absorb some. But if we get hit hard like 2008, then we don't have anything there. And my fear is that we'll fall back down to 90% or lower again within a couple of years if there is a downturn. And we'll take another 10 or 20 years to get back up to that funding level that we need to have to be sustainable, which is why we have to look at the design of the plan itself.
Sounds like everything we heard about the land transfer tax. Anyway, what I do hear then is you're looking at potentially benefit reductions and increased contributions.
I'll say bluntly that we don't believe, because at this point in time on the contribution rate side, we're basically at within 1% of the level set by the OMERS board, that the board does not really want to go there. We're trying to avoid that because you saw the rates there, and our rates are literally at the higher end comparable to all other pension plans. The faster we get up to 110% funding, the faster you can start looking at reducing the contribution rate. So we don't, if we have a preference, we don't want to look at contribution rate increases. Paul, do you
So
want?
how do we have input into this then as a city?
So when we pass this proposal at the end of June, the board will circulate to all sponsors, all employers, all employees.
We don't have council in place until the new year.
You have a fall council, I believe, Councillor?
No?
Okay, well, you have input through staff and yourselves as individuals, I suppose, representing the city. I'm also your representative. We can discuss the impacts of what you may see tabled in June.
Well, I think there needs to be a way for us to, we have to understand the employer contributions, and our employees need to understand.
And have formal response through staff if there is no council, and
Maybe you can defer for a bit to February.
I'll say this, Councillor, that this has been a year-and-a-half process, and we've set this time frame, and we've already deferred from a final decision in June.
Then, Joe, why wasn't
December.
something here we could react to earlier?
Well, I think you will see it in June, Councillor, and have some input then.
Okay, then we should put it on the July agenda. When are you going to approve it?
We're going to approve it at the end of June,
The end of June, okay.
the option, again, for consultation.
Okay, other questions on this presentation? No? Okay, I have a few. So I'm just trying to understand, trying to, I guess, get costs or understand the costs. When I was reading the annual report, Joe, or Mr. Panicetti, the OMERS sponsored corp, my understanding, the cost to operate it was $2.3 million last year. Is that high? Seemed to have risen up quite a bit from the previous years for operations.
Well, I think there are two factors involved. One is in prior years that the Sponsors Corp has been run as a bare bones operation and has maintained its budget for quite significant period of time. We did incur some additional costs related to the plan design last year through external experts and consultants. So yes, there was a bump in that year, as will be sustained through 2018, but should return to comparable levels in 2019.
No, sir, I'll just say that I'm now on the audit committee. Rest assured that I look at every penny that's spent on the OMERS SC board. From my viewpoint, there is all the $2.3 million is monies needed in order to just run a bare bones operation that Paul referred to. There's nothing extensive. When we have to hire consultants, there's always two or three that are, you know, 2 or 3 quotes minimum that we get, et cetera. So it's not, you know, if anything, I would say it's a very lean organization.
Right, okay, you're expecting it to go back down next year, though? 2.3 million stood out to me compared to other annual reports I've read.
Yes, to the extent that we complete this project and move forward, yes, that there should be a stabilization and a reduction of costs as we move into 2019.
Okay, and then my other question for Mr. Beatty, a few weeks ago, Moody's downgraded the OMER's bond rating, I understand, and that was based on OMER's reliance on contributions from the province. Could you comment on that, or somebody comment on that?
I'll ask Jonathan, please, he deals directly with the bond rating agencies.
So there wasn't a downgrade in OMER's credit rating, but it was moved from AAA with a stable to AAA with a negative outlook. So the AAA rating was maintained. That was linked to the credit rating agency's view of the rating of the province of Ontario. And so in the mind of the credit rating agency, there is a link between OMERS and the province. I think that link personally is remote, but that's their approach.
Okay, and so Mr. Panicchetti knows at the City of Toronto, we always guarded our credit rating religiously. So what are the plans to deal with the credit rating? Are you reversal?
I meet with the credit rating agencies at least annually. Part of the story that the credit rating agencies, that we're explaining to the credit rating agencies, is the improvement in our funded ratio. We are operating the plan at a very conservative level. Our recourse debt leverage is under 10% of the plan fund assets. And we intend to continue to maintain our leverage at those very low levels going into the future.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you. Thank you, gentlemen. I don't think there's any other questions. Okay, thank you very much. Is there any questions of staff on this item? Councillor Davis?
Could you give us just a very cursory information report in July once these decision documents, decision in principle options are public and tabled with the OMERS board or by the OMERS board?
So through the speaker, my understanding is that the board will be coming out with a series of options for consultation purposes. And once that is articulated by the board, it gives staff a very, very narrow window, very small window to report out on the substance of these recommendations.
I just see Joe shaking his head saying no. So, Mr. Chair, with your indulgence, is the decision in June, if I could ask Joe one question.
Yeah.
Is the decision in June going to reveal all of the options that you're discussing?
The only clarification I wanted to make through you, Mr. Chair, is there won't be options. There'll be one tabling of recommendations from the board in terms of any change at all. There won't be 2 or 3 options that had been occurring, and I apologize for possibly confusing Mr. Farag, so that it will be an option for consideration by all sponsors, employers, that you would respond to. It simplifies the possibility that we were at one point looking at options to be tabled, but we're simplifying that.
What's the date in June?
And June 29th, right at the end of June.
Every municipality, every school board,
yes,
are going to be gone for the whole period of time that you are consulting and will not be able to have a position on it.
September, October, November. We are lining up meetings right now.
That's when the election is, Joe. So I'm going to move a motion, if I could, to request you to report in whatever you know in June, and that we request the OMERS board to defer this until after the elections, and that municipalities and school boards can respond effectively or in a comprehensive way.
Okay, other questions of the movers? Or sorry, questions of staff? None? Okay. Speakers on this item?
I have two motions, but they're not quite ready. Do you want to stand it down?
I have a motion to,
Okay.
or do you want to stand this down while
Well,
you're
you go ahead and
writing
I'll
away?
see if I can get it done quickly.
Okay, I want to thank everybody from OMERS for coming in. You know, I think it's very important that and the reason I did this when I was first chair of the government management was I think it's important that we have a review of OMERS on an annual basis. OMERS, you know, that's where our pension funds are going, not only as councillors and politicians, but all of our staff. It's, you know, how we're hoping we're going to look after our families when we retire. And OMERS has certainly branched out since it first operated in 1963, as you can see from the charts. You know, it's not just investments in Canada, in Ontario, in cities. It's in North America. It's branching out throughout the world. I think, you know, it's a stable, very stable investment platform. But one of the concerns I do have, similar to Councillor Davis, is around the de-indexing of pensions. We have a city council meeting in June, we have one in July, and then we don't have another meeting until January. And so I do have a motion that I am moving, that City Council advise OMERS that it opposes the proposal to de-index pension payments and benefits to its retiree members. City Council directs its appointed representatives of OMERS to urge OMERS to remove consideration of the de-indexing of pension payments and benefits to its retiree members from its present plan and benefits review. So this motion will bring this item before City Council in June. I think it's appropriate when we're talking about the possibility of de-indexing pensions that this be dealt with on the floor of Council and not just before the Government Management Committee. If you see, OMERS does have a plan to erase a funding gap by 2025, but at the same time, their rate of return on their investments, which is great, 11.8%, but that equates to a $10 billion investment income return on an annual basis. So when I look at those numbers and the investments that OMERS is making, not only in Canada, the US, and around the world, I think that looking at de-indexing our pensions, the reason that OMERS ultimately is able to make those investments is for the contributions that are made by the members of the plan, which are a number of our city employees, not only us. And I think we have an obligation to look after our employees and make our position known. So this motion will put this item before City Council in June, when I think we can have the fulsome conversation and discussion around this that's needed, and not just here at Government Management. Thank you. Did you want to stand this down, Councillor Davis? So that's my motion on the screen.
First of all, I will speak, and I fully support Councillor Ainsley's motion. I'm disappointed that if there has been consultation going on for months, that we haven't had any opportunity formally as elected officials to make a contribution to that discussion. And here we are, 1 month before the end of term, being asked to somehow provide a reasonable response to such a significant, potentially significant change in our pension plans that may have impacts for both us as an employer and, of course, for our employees. So I'm very disappointed about that. So my one motion, though, is to request the DCM to report, and it's going to ask City Council, it's going to send City Council to request the interim Chief Financial Officer to report to the July 3rd Government Management Committee meeting with an update on the OMERS decision in principle options on changes to OMERS. And from there, I guess we can decide if there's any other position we'd like to take. I don't think it discounts yours, Councillor Ainsley. Might be prudent to wait to send in that response until it comes back in July, assuming yours passes. The other motion that's busily being typed by Carol, I think, thank you, Carol, is that we request the OMERS Board to extend the period of consultation to allow for the newly elected municipalities and school boards to provide appropriate feedback. I've been a member of OMERS, as many others have been for many years, and I don't want to, and I have represented people who were members of OMERS. Great. So I know how important the structure of our pension plans, how important it is to people. And we have an obligation, I think, as the employer and as a level of government to make sure we understand and provide feedback on what it is that is being considered. So I do acknowledge that there has been an improved rate of return. But if we are looking out to 2025 and considering additional revenue or reductions in benefits, we need to make sure we understand what those options are and give you feedback. The contributions from the City of Toronto alone, I read it. I can't find it right now because it's not in front of me, but it's like a quarter of your entire 17%. So we are the largest contributor. We're probably the largest beneficiary, our employees, and we have the largest stake in the decisions that you make. And so I would urge the OMERS Board to give us an opportunity to actually respond appropriately. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Other speakers on this item? Seeing none, so we have motions before us. So my motion is first. All in favor? Recorded vote. Okay. Councillor Crisanti. Sorry, you ready, Carol? Sorry, recorded vote. Councillor Crisanti, Councillor Ainsley, Councillor Davis, Councillor Shan, Councillor Troisi. It's unanimous. It passes. Councillor Davis's first motion is on the screen. Sorry, did you want recorded votes on these as well, Councillor Davis? No? Okay. All in favor of Councillor Davis's motion? Opposed? Seeing none, that one passes. Councillor Davis's second motion is on the screen. All in favor? That's unanimous. Item as amended. Don't need to do item as amended? Okay. Thank you. All right, so we are on to our next item. Item number 3, GM 28.3, Metropolitan Toronto Pension Plan, Preliminary Funding Valuation Report as of December 31st, 2017. Councillor Davis, you held that?
I did. This report, as well as the other the other reports on the legacy pension plans, make reference to a May 2018 change in provincial policy, and I'm wondering if someone could explain what it is, because it isn't in here.
Through the chair, in May, the province passed a regulation under the Pension Benefits Act changing how valuations for pension funds are to be done, including a provision for adverse deviation that is prescribed based on the makeup of pension funds assets. For example, in 28.3, we now have a reduction of 7.5% based on the asset makeup for the Metropolitan Toronto Pension Plan. That was the main change. There was also changes in terms of not requiring funding on a deficiency basis if you have at least 80% funded status. All of these pensions are 100% funded on both solvency and going concern, and that is not an issue. But there is this extra reduction.
Including police?
Including police. All of the funds, including York, are funded, fully funded on a solvency and a going concern basis.
So why is it taking so long for OMERS? That was another question for Joe, to take them on.
Actually, I can answer that, and it's not Joe, and it's not OMERS, and it's not city staff. It is a long and protracted regulatory framework that we have to go through. York has gone first, and it is with FSCO now. The first fund that has gone through took 9 months with FSCO. The second one that has gone through, I'm not sure how long that's taken, but certainly it's with FSCO, and representatives from OMERS and the city are constantly calling them to see how it's going and whose desk it's on. And York is expected to be effective October 31st of this year. We are expecting to transfer it at the end of this year, the beginning of next year. The other ones are expected to be done July, August, and October of next year, with the final surplus payments, and wind up late next year, early the year after.
Okay. The Metropolitan Toronto Pension Plan, the valuation is still not complete. It's one of the only ones, and I'm wondering why that is.
Actually, on a workload basis, the actuaries had to recalculate everything with this new regulation. They have given us the numbers. What they have not done is all of the detail in the valuation, so that we have all the information to move forward. The valuation will be forthcoming.
Is that because this is one of the largest of the remaining plans, or they've got a different consultant?
Well, we have 2 different actuaries for the 5 different plans, and it has a fair amount to do with workload that they have. This is their busy time of year, and the rules changed partway through them doing these valuations, and we wanted everything done on the new methodology.
In layperson's terms, that new policy will do what?
The new policy shows a slightly smaller surplus because you have to set money aside for anticipated investment losses.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Good, Councillor Davis.
Just move adoption.
You have to let me ask if anybody else has questions first.
Oh, I don't know.
Anybody else have questions on this item? Seeing none, speakers. Councillor Davis, did you wish to speak on this item?
I'll just move adoption.
Councillor Davis is moving adoption. All in favor of the recommendations? Carried. And our next item is, thanks, Carol. Number 10, 2017 consulting service expenditures, city and division, major agencies and corporations. Councillor Tracy, you held this?
I was just going to ask the question on why such a decrease in operating from 2016. There's a 35% decrease in 2017 compared to 2016.
Through the chair, consulting expenses are typically zero-based, so it depends on what we have to do in the year and what ends up getting contracted and done, so that it will be lumpy.
Yeah, it's just very significant in terms of the percentage. I think Councillor Davis, you had something. Is this relating to any policies? I know you referred to a policy in 2001 in terms of the criteria of selection, et cetera, et cetera. Are we monitoring that better? You know, we're spending a lot on consultants is basically my issue, I guess.
Through the chair, the monitoring has been consistent, and the head person that did the monitoring, we actually celebrated at the beginning of this meeting. And certainly he has passed on that knowledge to his staff to ensure that we continue to monitor it on the same basis go forward.
Great, thank you.
Councillor Davis, I saw your hand.
Yeah, well, you used the word lumpy. I guess that means up and down. I like that. But there are some areas that are huge, like IT, where there was a huge increase. I presume somewhere, if I had gone through in fine detail, I could have seen what the projects were. But the other areas, management, R&D. We spent a lot of money on management projects. And I want to understand why this kind of work can't be done in-house.
Through the chair, typically for transformation type projects, you need help in that we're very good at continuous improvement and continuing to do things the way we do them. We are not as good at transformational change, and we need help to do that.
Are there areas where we're contracting out now that we didn't used to, these kinds of services? Policy, work?
On an overall basis, I actually cannot say without going through detail.
Because it would be very nice to understand. I mean, we just get these great big tables. We've got 1 year you've given us to compare. 17 over 16. It's very hard to know whether this lumpy pattern has, I'd love to see it over a 10-year period, because I remember we used far, far less in terms of total spending on consultants 10 years ago.
On the intranet, we do have 5 years worth of data. However, it's not intuitive or easy to look at. Certainly, we could come back the next time with a longer comparison. We do show on Table 3 on page 12, 5 years worth of comparisons at a high level.
I wish your tables were formatted the same way between capital and operating. Okay. Page 12. Oh, right. Yeah. Right, well, that alone shows some increase between 2013 and 17 overall on the capital side, and definitely on the operating side. And I think the one that I came without my marked up agenda today. So the largest areas are, where are we increasing on the operating side over these years? Where has there been the greatest increase? I guess you can't tell. Is it management consulting? Is it planning? Is it like, I know the report looks favorable because you've compared 17 to 16. And I don't know why 16 was so heavy. Probably had to do with transit capital and other studies that were done for the network transit plan.
I do know there was a lot on the ABCs and a lot for Toronto Transit. Last year, there was a lot for planning in the last couple of years. But as far as a detailed analysis, we can certainly
How does it work? Somebody gets so planning gets a budget that says so much for consultants? Or there's a central account and people come and say, I need it, and you measure against some kind of criteria? Or they just make a business case, or how does it work?
It's through the annual budget. Different divisions make a case for funding on both the operating and the capital side, and consulting is zero-based, such that you start and you have to account for everything you wish to spend, as opposed to having a base budget that's already there.
So you build the consulting budget from zero for every year?
Correct.
Okay. But, all right. Thank you. So it's just a matter of putting it in the budget. There's no, is there an overall budget limit?
You have to meet the other budget constraints that are in place so that it ends up.
So you leave some positions vacant, you could get more consulting.
There are many ways to build it into your budget.
And through the chair, you do not get the dollars unless you actually demonstrate a business case through that process. So you do have to demonstrate that through the budget process. It's pretty rigorous around trying to actually get that type of allocation into your budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none. Speakers? Councillor Troisi, you held this?
No, I'll move it.
Okay, Councillor Troisi is moving the recommendations on this. All in favor? Carried. Our next item is number 16, amendment to purchase order number 6043-220, the Riverdale Park East-Northeast Quadrant Park improvements in Ward 30, held by Councillor Davis.
I had my questions answered. I'll move adoption.
Does anybody else have questions on this item? Seeing none, Councillor Davis is moving the recommendations in this. All in favor? Carried. Our next item is GM 28.25, opportunities to utilize car share technology solutions on city-owned vehicles. Does anybody have questions on this item? Councillor Davis?
So if I right away, I was thinking you were using Uber, and I panicked, but clearly you're not using Uber. The idea is that we are developing we're trying to develop a new technology to allow us to share amongst our own employees for internal in-house use. Is that correct? Who's the?
Yes, that's the intention.
Okay.
We'll use existing technology solutions. We'll look at existing vehicles in-house and how we can share.
Okay, so it is about taking that fleet and using it more efficiently.
The low use.
So can you just give us a little more detail about how this pilot is going to work and who is going to be doing it?
So we don't have the technology providers at this time. We are going to do a competitive call for solutions that will meet our needs. And we are looking at utilizing it on existing fleet vehicles, and MLS has also volunteered 3 vehicles. So we'll put technology on and we will monitor the best ways to share the vehicle interdivisionally and within the division. So MLS will look at sharing within their division, the idea being to reduce other low usage vehicles. So we will potentially see a savings.
So there was one other division you said first, I didn't hear.
So fleet services itself with its existing vehicles.
And how many are you going to have?
We have a total 10. 10 for
So we're only going to have 13 vehicles in the pilot?
Yes.
Is that really worth the effort to do the RFP and the procurement and design the system for 13 vehicles?
Well, it will enable us to look at the solutions that will meet the needs, the complex needs of the city. Both Fleet and MLS have multiple locations. We'll be able to look at the best solution, whether it's a lockbox or an online system, and look at the operational impacts and the costs associated with it for staff to monitor it, to clean vehicles, and to ensure vehicles are moving properly. And then we can look at expanding it.
So it may not be a technology solution, it may be a lockbox?
Well, lockbox is a technology solution.
Oh, okay.
Both
I
are
think I read
technology
that.
solutions. One is just different from the other.
Okay.
Lockbox, where you get the key separately, and the other one where the key will be inside the vehicle, but you'll use your smartphone to access it.
Right, I did read that. But can you expand it, this pilot? Why did you decide only 10 and 3?
We consulted with multiple divisions.
This, through the chair, this will allow us to look at both solutions to see how we get better expanded. We wanted to keep it small to begin with because we want to develop the business rules internally to see how we could share it amongst ourselves and then potentially expand it. The business rules are scalable, so once we develop it for both technologies, we can expand it after the pilot.
Okay. Did you ask fire by any chance? They've now got this whole fleet of little red cars for all those inspectors and education people.
No, we did not.
How many vehicles does fire have for those little cars? Do you know?
Can't answer that. No.
Okay. You should go talk to them.
We've talked to fire.
Thank you. I don't.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Davis. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none. So I have some questions. I wanted to ask about, so on page, I guess 4 of 5, it has the cost estimates for an 8-vehicle pilot project and a 5-vehicle pilot project, but it doesn't say what the cost savings are. So in Chicago, for example, which I had a meeting when I was there 4 years ago in Chicago, so they have a very comprehensive car share program that they do with Zipcar and Fast Fleet, and I just got an estimate. Their fleet of vehicles is about the same size as ours, and the most recent estimate I got from them, their avoided capital cost each year on their car share program is $375,000, and their avoided maintenance costs are $45,000. But we seem to be keeping this all in-house. And when I was in Chicago, their car sharing, at the time they were using Zipcar, and they were the vehicles were all owned by Zipcar and pooled, and was saving on, they were saving a lot of money annually buying vehicles, which is why I originally brought this forward. And we're doing a pilot project with 13 vehicles.
So we do have an external car share program in place now, and we have seen an annual savings of $240,000 by using Enterprise and Zipcar. This pilot is specifically to look at putting technology on our vehicles so that we can use existing fleet vehicles, the type we need, such as pickup trucks and vans, within divisions and divisions at yards. So the vehicles will actually be located on city sites. So for easier access for operational needs as opposed to staff going to meetings and that type of thing. So we do expect savings because we do expect the opportunity to reduce low usage vehicles. We just can't quantify that because we don't know the operational impacts. What divisions need in terms of pickup trucks, their varying hours of operation, some are 24/7, some during the day. We need to look at how those vehicles would be available to them.
Sorry, I missed the last bit about pickup trucks. Are we already doing vehicle sharing with our pickup truck
No,
fleet?
that is what the pilot is going to look at.
Okay, and why was it not a part of the original car sharing agreement? vehicle sharing?
The original external is primarily for staff who are driving to various meetings, that type of thing. They'll be Class 1 type vehicles.
Okay, so so it's being envisioned in this project. So we're going to look at pickup trucks, for example.
Other cars and pickup trucks and vans that staff are using for daily operational needs.
Right. But these are vehicles that we're still buying, maintaining, and we're going to dispose of at the end of their life cycle that we're expecting to do vehicle sharing with.
Yes, yes. So there would be opportunities to dispose of vehicles, low usage vehicles.
So why, I guess what I'm trying to understand, and I use Chicago again as the example, when I was in Chicago and they highlighted the fact that they were doing vehicle sharing with Zipcar. They had a maintenance program, commercial program for pickup trucks, which is where they're getting most of their money from. And we seem to be, we're here now, and this seems to be taking a long time. And my idea of vehicle sharing is so in Chicago, for example, Zipcar, their vehicle fleet of pickup trucks, they own them, they maintain them. We don't have to spend this money on software and putting in lock boxes. Zipcar doesn't even do that in Chicago. They have a card. And to get in the vehicle, you need that card to even get in the vehicle. I don't understand why we seem to be keeping a lot of this still in-house and taking that cost.
So our Zipcar locations tend to be located around our administrative buildings, not our operational sites. Trying to get staff to locations to pick up vehicles, that type of thing, that's just not going to be operationally feasible. So we're looking at the vehicles that are currently at our yards, at all our various sites, on how to share on site. Right now, staff for our external program actually have to travel to pick up their vehicle. And with tools and other operational requirements, I'm not thinking that would be a feasible.
Right, so if I compare what we're doing in this project to what we're doing in Chicago, so there's no avoided capital costs.
There is expected to be avoided capital costs with the internal program, just like we had with the external program. So the external program we've already saved in avoided capital costs. The internal program, we expect to be able to reduce vehicles also.
Right, but there's no mention of avoided capital costs in this report.
Not until we look at the operational impacts and the complexity of sharing amongst yards across a vast region like the city, how we can operationalize that.
And there's no avoided maintenance costs either because we still own the vehicles.
But once we dispose of them, we'll avoid maintenance costs and the contribution to reserve annually. We do expect costs, we just don't know we do expect savings, we just don't know what those savings will be until we look at the pilot and how to operationalize this.
Okay, all right, thank you. Button. Other questions of staff on this item? Seeing none. Speakers? Councillor Davis?
I think this is great, and I do think that we are a big enough employer, and we have a large enough fleet that we could do this in-house. I would rather take the investment and invest it in our own infrastructure than contract out to some third party. And we have specialized vehicles. Let's see if we can use a way to use a new technology to be able to use them more efficiently. And I think it's excellent. It just seems like too few vehicles participating in it. So if you can increase that for the pilot, I think that that would be great. Thank you.
Other speakers? Seeing none? Okay. So I have a motion that this item be referred to the General Manager, Fleet Services for report to the July 3rd, 2018 Government Management Committee meeting to provide further details on car sharing technology solutions as well as information on solutions being used in other North American municipalities. And so I think this is a great project as well. When I was in Chicago 4 years ago, almost 5 years ago now, one of the things I did was I went to the city of Chicago, their fleet operations, because I'd heard that they had a vehicle sharing program. And one of the things that stood out to me was they took me to a parks compound, for example, where they had 8 pickup trucks at one time. They were down to 4 pickup trucks. And the 4 pickup trucks were owned at the time by Zipcar. They have commercial fleet operations. You have, at the time they still do, if you were an employee that worked in the parks department, you needed one of the pickup trucks. You had a card, there was an online reservation system. The 4 pickup trucks were parked in any given parks compound across the city. Zipcar looked after all the maintenance. And they're still doing it on an annual basis. So I was back in 2012. The most recent avoided capital costs from the city of Chicago, as I said earlier, is $375,000 a year. The avoided maintenance cost was $45,000 a year. And they don't have every vehicle. We have, as Councillor Davis was just saying, we have very specialized vehicles across our fleet that have to be maintained. They're probably better maintained in-house and looked after. But when you're looking at general vehicles, pickup trucks, cube vans, some of the motor vehicles that our staff are driving, they're better used in a car share program. I think the best use of our budget is not having, our fleet is very comparable to the city of Chicago. Avoiding a $375,000 capital cost annually, that you could be putting that money into other areas of our budget, I think is a much more appropriate use. I want to thank staff for the work they've done on looking at this program so far, but I think there are other areas that we need to look at in terms of how we best use technology to make this program work. So that's the motion I'm putting forward. Any other speakers? You already spoke. You can ask me questions if you want.
So you want to privatize our fleet, or a portion of it?
I think, for the capital savings and using technology and better use of what I saw in Chicago, I think that bringing somebody in to do vehicle sharing is the best way to manage our budget.
It's not vehicle sharing, it's vehicle leasing, and it would mean the privatization of our fleet. So anyway, thank you. I don't support that.
That's okay.
Your motion is just for further information, though, correct, Paul?
Yes, it'll come back in July.
Yeah, so it's not a decision, it's further clarification. Thank you.
Yes. Okay, so there's a motion on the screen. All in favor? Opposed? That loses on a tie. Item is amended, or sorry, not amended. Recommendations? Okay, all right. So we need somebody to move the recommendation in the report. Councillor Davis. All in favor of the recommendations in the report? Opposed? And that loses on a tie. So this goes to council without recommendations. Okay. Our next item is number 29, implementation plan and framework for integrating circular economy approaches into city procurement processes to support waste reduction and diversion. Councillor Davis, you held this item? And now we have a staff presentation. Do you want it distributed? Does the committee want a presentation?
I would like to understand better. Exactly.
So you want a presentation?
Well, now we've got something in.
It's a presentation.
They whipped that up in the last.
They did.
Then we
Well,
have
we're
to
debating
have
car
it, then.
sharing. So you want the presentation?
Yes, now that they've done it.
Okay.
Not to brag, but we're pretty good in solid waste, Councillor.
Although you're probably just recycling another one.
That's efficiency.
You reused.
Where's Councillor Santi?
So thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. We'll move through this pretty quickly. There's a lot of content in here, and we did kind of put it together pretty quickly. But and yes, this is a recycled presentation, but recycled's good too. So probably the most important slide is actually the second slide to explain what a circular economy is, because this is a fairly new concept for most people. What traditionally we've lived in is a linear economy where you buy a product, and at the end of the life of that product, you dispose of the product. We are now living in an economy where recycling is becoming more prevalent. Still not for everything, but there's more and more options for recycling. And in a recycling type economy, you buy a product, and at the end of the life of or your use of that product, it gets recycled into something new, and it can get used again. But eventually, at the end, it has an end of life, and it gets disposed. In a circular economy, the concept is that when you buy that product, it's not only recyclable, but it can be repaired. So it's not a product that once it can't be used anymore, you just throw it out or you throw it in the recycling and get rid of it. You can actually repair it so that then you keep that product even longer and it has an even longer life. It's talking about incorporating greater efficiencies, greater sustainability in the purchasing of products, reusing of products, and bringing repairability back into the product chain, which is something that's largely disappeared over the last several decades. So what we want to do in solid waste in partnership with purchasing, PMMD, and a number of the other divisions that we've worked with already and done some workshops with, is try to look at doing some pilots where we embed circular economy principles into our actual purchasing process. So many of you have probably heard of green procurement, which is sort of an older term. This is sort of the next evolution of green procurement. And looking at building this in. So what we'll look at is building principles into our procurement that actually take into things like climate change and being able to meet our transformed TO goals, and actually building those principles into procurement and how we go out and purchase goods and services. Looking at the full life cycle of a product that we buy. So not only looking at how much does it cost initially, but what's the life cycle cost of that product? If it has to be disposed after 3 years and you have to continually buy more, versus maybe paying a little bit more upfront for that product, but it's got repairability built into it. So you get that first 3 years, you repair it, you get another 2 or 3 years out of it. In the end, it might be a more expensive product to buy initially, but over the life cycle of the product itself, it'll actually save a lot more money. And this is all tied into aspirational goals of zero waste and different types of concepts that you'll see in the long-term waste management strategy. This is done in parallel to and tied directly into the supply chain transformation that Mike and his team are working through. It's aligned with a number of different city council strategies already, like reduction of greenhouse gas emissions. On the social side, looking at improving community health, well-being, employment. If you build repairability back into some of the products that you purchase, it can actually enhance local economic benefits where you've actually got increased jobs who are actually attached to the local repair options that come along with the products you're purchasing. And then looking at all the different relatives, partners, and sectors that would be involved with this. Some of the goals really is to increase the amount of goods and services that are purchased by the city that are regenerative by design. That they have lower life cycle greenhouse gas emissions, less toxic by design, and rely less on raw material extraction and consumption. One of the goals through this would be looking at the number of city contracts that could actually incorporate circular economy principles, and looking at, ultimately the goal in the future would be, as we look at city contracts moving forward, how can we look at them through the lens of a circular economy as well? I'm on slide 6 now. In terms of some of the objectives, I apologize, I'm going fast, but in terms of some of the objectives, when we look at the procurement and going through this pilot, we'll be looking at some of the considerations would be access to service over ownership, repairability options, how products can be returned for repairs, percentage of recycled content, which could be stipulated in the purchase. Details around life cycle analysis and greenhouse gas emissions. So what are all the impacts associated with that product leading up to the point of it becoming a product, which could be important in a future procurement. And then ultimately, does it contribute to reducing our carbon footprint as a city? Looking at, circular economy is not only a relatively new concept to the city, but it's also a relatively new concept to the marketplace. So that's in part why we want to start with a pilot, is to understand how this could be embedded in our procurement ourselves. But we also then need to be able to get that out to the actual marketplace so that they understand when we come out with a procurement that includes circular economy principles, how do they then respond to that procurement? So we need to be providing advice out to the vendors who would be responding to these types of procurements so they actually know what to look for. And our hope, in part, is that when they understand that we're now going to be looking for these types of aspects in our procurements, that will then influence their design, their types of materials that they use, all those types of things. And ultimately so that they can then build that own internal capacity so that they are in a position to be able to respond to city procurements, knowing that those types of requirements are going to be built in. Just a few more here. What's going to be important about this, because it is really relevant or relatively new, is building in key performance indicators. So understanding what our baseline is for procurement today, and then when you move forward with building a circular economy principles into procurement, how does that compare over the baseline a few years from now? Do we see those measurable savings in cost, the measurable reductions in greenhouse gas emissions, all those sorts of things? So we'll be coming forward, or we'll be identifying what that sort of key list is of measurements so that we can actually demonstrate how this has actually saved money and improved the environment moving forward. And then again, this is all in line with the goals of the long-term waste management strategy. The final slide is just the timeline for what we're doing. So right now we're at the beginning here, the draft framework to Government Management Committee. We're working through the identification of the various pilots that we'll be looking at and the different divisions that will be involved. We engaged a number of different divisions here at the city that procure both products and services. And I think a widespread interest from all those divisions on looking at building these types of concepts into their future procurements. Identifying who the key stakeholders are that will need to be involved in helping to both identify what the right criteria will look like, but also in terms of bringing some vendors to the table to understand what limitations they might have initially and longer term to responding to something like this. And then ultimately we'll move forward through this and we'll bring a report back. We're targeting November of next year. We'll bring a report back. Once we've gone through a few of these pilot procurement processes, we've seen what the results have generated, we can report back with recommendations on how to move it forward even further.
Thank you. Yes, excellent. Thank you very much. And what I'm wondering is the type of procurement you're likely to use. Do you see using a request for expressions of interest or a request for proposal for or tenders? Like, are you looking at trying different procurements? Because with a tender, you're very clear, we want this, 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 and this. And there may be some products where that's easier to do than others. So maybe you can just expand on what type of procurement and which divisions are interested at this point.
Through the chair, so the first part, we'll be looking for different types of pilots that, one, embed the circular economy concept into the procurement evaluation component as well as into the contract. So we will try to do RFPs and RFQs or tenders so that we can see how both work, so that we can make a fulsome policy decision and recommendation in the end. With respect to some of the divisions that have expressed interest, solid waste, of course, they want to be first.
Through the chair, so divisions that have expressed interest have included solid waste management services, EED, Now, we do have a whole working group set up, which includes divisions such as PFNR, planning, transportation. So we are, in fact, soliciting interest from those groups, from those divisions to participate as a pilot. So we have a few already volunteers, but we are looking at all those within the working group to provide an opportunity to be part of a pilot.
So in the past, when we've tried to integrate some of our larger policy objectives into the procurement process, like Canadian content or other things, we've been told, oh, the trade rules are such that we can't possibly do that. So how is it that we are avoiding any interprovincial or CETA or other trade regulations?
Through the chair, as part of the pilots, we'll work to make sure that we're in compliance with the trade agreements, as we did with social procurement. So we'll try to make sure that how we craft it doesn't run against any existing trade agreements that are in place.
Well done, Mr. Patulin. Good answer. Thank you.
Other questions of staff? Seeing none. Speakers?
Thank you. This is excellent. This is exactly, we have such procurement power in this city, and we should be exercising that power to get the kind of changes we need in public on the issues that are critical to us, and solid waste and reducing our diversion and broadening our reach in terms of achieving those objectives are just so important. So I'm really looking forward to seeing the outcome of this pilot project. Thank you.
Only we had more money to do it. Where could we get it from?
What? I will adopt the recommendations. I don't see why you think it's going to be any more expensive.
Our next item, I'm just poking away at you. Our next item is establishment of a French language university in Toronto, held by me. Councillor Davis, you had questions of staff? I did have my item. The lawyers revised their paperwork. I had a motion that I put up in a three-part that the lawyers sent me. You had questions about financial assistance, I believe. Oh, yes. The lawyers sent a revised. It now says to determine any non-financial assistance. Non-financial. And these motions stem from the fact when I read the report, education is not really a municipal jurisdiction, and I asked why we were muddying the waters, and they sent this that said it would help provide clarification. All good? Okay. All in favor of the motion on the screen? Carried. Item is amended. All in favor? Carried. Number 33, Nathan Phillips Square Bike Station.
I have worked with staff and with Councillor McMahon, and I think we have a motion that's acceptable to everyone all around, which is to continue to explore additional parking spaces at City Hall following the opening of the facility so that we know better what the demand is, and that you look at any potential growth that might be required.
Any questions of the mover? Anybody else wish to speak? All in favor of the item on the screen? Opposed? Seeing none, carried. And I think that was our last item. Oh, Councillor Tracy, you have the confirming bill?
Yep. That the Government Management Committee pass and declare as a bylaw a confirmatory bill to confirm the legislative proceedings of the Government Management Committee acting under delegated authority at meeting 28 held on June 5th, 2018.
Any questions of the mover? All in favor? All in favor? Carried. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a great day. Thank you for everything, Carol.